Welcome back to the SSL Family Dad channel. Today we are going to have a challenge between two different, very controversial methods of starting a fire. Is it better to start a fire from the bottom up, or is it better to start a fire from the top down? Which way is better? Which way burns cleaner? Which way gets a fire going quicker? Which gets you the longest burning fire? We're gonna kind of talk about all these different points. I have tried to keep this experiment as fair as possible using the same wood stove. I did this on two separate days, so I did a fire in this one, I timed it and recorded it, and then let the whole fire cool down. I cleaned all the ash out, and then I started another fire the next day and did the same exact thing. In both tests, I'm using the same wood. So in both cases, I started with the same wood from the same stack that's been seasoned and cut around the same time. I took that into the garage and I processed that wood into various sizes. I'm using a new little toy that I got from vivor.com for this. It's a mini wood splitter. I set this up in it's a little crate that I got from a little industrial park. They had it out on the side of the road years ago, and I got a couple of them, and it's been extremely handy. So I have that set up in the garage. I have the little Vivor wood splitter bolted into that box on some 4x4s. And I use that to split all of my wood. So you just use a sledgehammer, or in my case, ironically, I'm using a handheld splitter, but I just use the sledgehammer part of that, and it splits really easy. So I started with various sizes of oak. They're all about 16 inches to 18 inches long, and split all that wood up in various sizes. With the first test, we're gonna test our top-down fire starting method. This has been a method that has been shown to me by friends, by YouTube commenters, and other people have told me about, but I have never tried. I've never been sold on this idea. I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos about how to properly start a fire from the top down and tried to follow this to the best of my ability. So I started by stacking all of my largest logs on the bottom of the fire, and then I crisscrossed them, leaving air gaps. I tried to split all of the pieces into triangles and odd shapes so that everything wouldn't lay flat together in there. There's lots of airspace. Largest stuff on the bottom, then another row that I put perpendicular to that, and then another row I put perpendicular to that, and I just kept going smaller and smaller and smaller until I got to the top. Now on the top, I just used some kindling, so I have a little box or bucket of all the scraps that I get whenever I split wood and all that stuff, little pieces of bark and splinters and things, and I just used a tiny little bit of cardboard and paper to get it started on the top. I put that cardboard and paper in there amongst some smaller kindling and then lit it with just a lighter. So I didn't use my torch like I normally do or anything. Lit that on the top, and then I just let it burn. For the first 5 minutes on this particular wood stove, I leave the door cracked open, and that allows lots of air to get into the fire. Then after about 5 minutes, I shut the door. I still have the air vent set to its maximum airflow for about the first maybe 15 minutes to 20 minutes or so, and then I shut that down after that and let the fire just kind of burn cleanly. So that is the result of the top-down fire. What did I notice? Well, it started a lot slower. It took a lot more time for the fire to get up to a temperature where the blower kicks on. This is on a thermostat, so this particular blower only kicks on after it gets hot enough. It started a lot slower, so it took a lot more time for that kindling to start to burn and really get into those logs and really produce substantial heat. However, I will say that the top-down fire, it did burn way cleaner. You're not burning the larger pieces of wood prematurely when they're not really heated up enough and your firebox isn't really hot enough. You're burning the small pieces of wood at the top, which allows them to burn very completely and very cleanly. And so I did find the top-down fire to be very clean burning. There's almost no smoke that visibly in the firebox. and everything was extremely clean. And the other thing is that I didn't need to touch it. I just lit that on fire. Once I got it going, after 5 minutes, I closed the door and I just walked away. I never had to stir it up. I never had to add any wood to it. All the wood was already in the box. And after I lit that fire and let it burn for a very long time. So I didn't have to add any wood to it. It burned on its own for many hours, which was really nice. And I was actually very impressed. The top-down fire method, it really does work, and it really does work really well. So I was surprised. The next method of fire starting that I tried is the bottom-up method. Now, this is the method of fire starting that makes the most sense to me and probably you. We did a survey on Instagram, and it looks like most people start their fires this way. I think the cavemen started their fires this way, and I think most people ever since then have started their fires this way. So this is the way that logically made the most sense to me. We put our fast burning materials on the bottom. So I started with, in my case, we always have extra cardboard boxes and paper bags and other things like that. I saved some of that stuff, and instead of throwing it in the trash, I used it to start fires. And then I start to throw some kindling on there. So I throw some of my smaller pieces on there, maybe some of my bark and some of my smaller split pieces of oak. Just kind of throw that in there in a random pattern. I like to leave lots of air gaps so that stuff doesn't fall down flat on top of the burning cardboard. And then I put some bigger pieces on top of that in a random pattern, and then the larger pieces on top. Now with this method of fire starting, I'm not able to get my biggest logs in the firebox. They won't fit because the cardboard is taking up space in the firebox. So I went ahead and lit it from the bottom. Now usually I use my torch for this, but to make it fair, I used the same lighter and I lit the cardboard in a couple spots on the bottom. Again, I left the door on the wood stove open for about the first 5 minutes, and then after that I went ahead and closed it, but leaving the air supply on the wood stove to its full open position. And what I found with this fire starting method is no surprise to me. It is how I've always started fires. You immediately get the cardboard, which starts very easily, burns very quickly. It's obviously dry, and that cardboard creates enough heat energy to start your next size of kindling on fire. The small size of kindling, that starts first, and once that gets going, it's producing more heat energy, which then starts to dry out and heat up the wood above it and start that on fire. And again, where all that heat energy is from the bottom, it is pushing up and heating up all the wood above it, and the fire and the flames are coming right up through all that, and so you get all your heat energy working on all the wood that you have put in the firebox. But what I have found is this started really fast. It burned really fast. So I was able to get that lighter in there, get that cardboard going, and after about 10 minutes, I had a full burning hot fire. Now, the disadvantage is that I did have to tend it a little more. So after some time, I have to open the door and add some bigger logs into the fire. And then after some time again, I had to add, my biggest logs once I've got a nice bed of coals in there. So it does require a little more tending. But really, after the first 20 minutes, guess what? Both fires were the same. They were burning. They were burning very well, and they produced heat, and they were a fire. Well, we have now seen two ways to start a fire, from the bottom up and from the top down. They both have their advantages and disadvantages, but in the end, we ended up with a fire in both cases. The top-down method requires a little bit more prep. I think it requires a little bit more of staging. It takes a little bit longer to set up initially, but it is pretty hands-off. Once you kind of stack it up, you've got all your wood in there, and it burns for a very long time. It also burns very clean. It's a very efficient use of wood. So I agree that it's probably the better way to start a fire. I'm going to admit that it is a overall better way to start a fire. But in most cases, to be completely honest with you, I'm probably not going to take the extra time to do that. I'm probably just going to throw some boxes that I have next to the fire in there, throw some littler stuff, some bigger stuff in the fire, and start it on fire with my torch. I cannot wait to hear what you guys think. What is your favorite way to start a fire, and what did you think of the results? Do you think that the top-down was the ultimate way? Do you think we should just all change the way we've started fires and we should go to the top-down method, or does the traditional bottom-up method have its place in modern society? I'll let you decide. Throw it down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit thumbs up on today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If this is your first time to the SSL Family Dad channel, love to have you tag along and subscribe. We release new videos every week, at least 1 or 2. We do everything from gardening and DIY projects to farming, small scale, caring for animals and other things like that. Anything that you would think that a dad would do on a small woodland homestead. So love to have you tag along. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good one.